So we are talking about the 2016 movie Ghost Hunters. This one is directed by Perry Reginald Teo and is not to be confused with the TV show of the same name, nor the animated kids movie. Now, Ghost Hunters is made by Asylum Pictures, and that might put you off straight away, but I urge you to hold on for just a second. Now, there's no denying that Ghost Hunters is coming out the same year as a certain other movie, but nonetheless, I feel this one has a bit of a unique hook to it. And that hook is this. Imagine, if you will, if you were to take the premise of the original Ghostbusters movie, remove the comedy and the jokes from it, but replace it with extreme horror and gore, and that's your movie. This is pretty much Ghostbusters, but taken seriously, without the kind of the comedy element to it. So, to me, that's a pretty intriguing premise. Now, we talked about the Asylum Pictures. Asylum Pictures has a bit of a reputation for churning out these mockbusters that are really just cash-ins on kind of popular big blockbuster movies and kind of making rip-off versions of them. And that is true. But every so often, I feel that the Asylum does knock out a fairly decent movie. It tends to be the horror films that they tend to strike gold with a little bit, and this one is no exception. Now, I'm not saying this is the best movie ever, but I have to say, if you judge it on its own merits, this is actually a pretty good horror film. Now, the premise here, basically, we have a team of kind of paranormal researchers are basically trying to develop a way to capture ghosts. Now, one of the lead scientists' family are actually killed by a kind of Darth Vader-like serial killer, kind of slasher, and basically he's kind of desperate to try and basically make contact with his family, because obviously they've been killed in this house of this kind of serial killer. So basically he and a few colleagues basically go into this house, set up shop, and try to make contact with a variety of spirits and develop some kind of machinery along the way that enables them to kind of capture spirits and able to almost transform their essence into an ectoplasm, which they can then study and actually read, almost like DNA for ghosts. So it's got quite an intriguing idea to it. So let's talk about the good and the bad of Ghost Hunters. We'll start off with the negatives first of all, and the big one here is that this movie takes some serious liberties with other properties. Obviously, we're talking about Ghostbusters. It's obviously the primary film here that is being homaged, shall we say, but there's other films as well. Interestingly, Lights Out, which is kind of a YouTube short, is also kind of taken some liberties with, but other films like Saw, House on Haunted Hill, 13 Ghosts even, there's quite a few different obviously influences here on this movie. But I feel if you can kind of look past that and judge it on its own merits, how it kind of looks as a kind of horror film, I feel it's very easy to kind of write off a film that obviously takes influences in certain scenes and really just kind of recreates them wholesale, but it still kind of works as a film. However, there are a couple of other bits and pieces that I will go through. Sometimes the visual effects are a little kind of ropey. They're not bad for the most part, but there's a couple of scenes that involve these dark figures that I feel look a bit weak compared to some of the other ones. There's also some kind of logic issues here, and this is probably the biggest legitimate complaint here. The way these kind of scientists are able to basically MacGyver these kind of inventions with household electronics, to be honest with you, in kind of a short amount of time, seems a little silly. And also there's some other logic involved here. There's a twist that comes, which I feel it tipped its hat a little bit early and kind of makes it a little bit obvious what's going to happen. But nonetheless, when you kind of stop and think about the rest of the film and think that there are a couple of deaths here that don't quite tie into what has just happened, but there you go. So some things are left kind of a little unexplained about why did certain things happen. And then finally, in regards to the negatives, the end of the film, I feel, goes into a bit more of a kind of action-y type sort of climax, and I feel it kind of lets off a little bit of steam and kind of isn't quite the horror film that it kind of set out to be. So that's the kind of the negatives here. On the positives here, I have to say the way this is shot, doesn't feel like an Asylum film. This definitely feels more along the lines of your James Wan's, basically more like a Blumhouse production rather than an Asylum production. It definitely feels like it's had some some more thought and some more care on it. So that is really down to the director here, Perry Reginald Teo. Just makes it feel like a better film than really the Asylum genuinely kind of puts out. And I'd also have to say the acting as well, also pretty good across the board. There's a couple of more wobbly line deliveries, but for the most part here, the acting is all pretty good and everyone is good in their roles. There are some genuinely creepy moments in it. Yes, there's some jump scares, but I feel that they were kind of fairly well done. I think the set design is very good. It's a little bit OTT sometimes, but I feel the set design is pretty good and looks pretty horrific. This kind of murder house that you must wonder what the neighbours would think about this house. But anyway, but I think the set design, although it goes a little bit too far sometimes, I feel looks pretty good. There are some quite extreme horror elements here as well. It basically has its fingers in so many pies. It really does cover the whole kind of gambit of horror: ghosts, serial killers, cannibalism, torture, everything. It's all in here basically. And I have to say, although there are a couple of shaky moments, for the most part there are some decent ghostly effects here, and the way they kind of use these kind of goggles to view the kind of the spirits and stuff like that, it makes it quite fun. I also quite like the idea of kind of making the ghost into an ectoplasm that can be literally kind of handled and studied and stuff like that, and kind of the way they say all the ghosts have kind of individual properties. It all makes for quite intriguing stuff, to be honest with you, and it's like I would have maybe to see that explored a little bit further. So this film really does have, I feel, some good original ideas, obviously mixed in with a load of kind of stuff that you've seen from other properties as well, which I feel is going to be the kind of the easy thing for people to jump on with this film when they're criticising it, that it's just a rip-off of other films, which, you know, in one way I would say, yeah, that is true, but in the same way I still feel it works as a film. It works as a horror film. Let's say you haven't seen any of these kind of like movies before, and you watch this one as the first horror film, you would enjoy the heck out of it, I feel. And like I said, I feel that the premise here of having a serious take on the Ghostbusters is an interesting one, basically, and I'm glad I kind of watched it. I have to say I did quite enjoy this one. I appreciate it does have a few problems here and there, but overall I thought this was a decent entry into a kind of the haunted house kind of you know, plethora of films that we have out there, and definitely worth your time if you're a horror fan. Don't let the Asylum label kind of put you off, because once in a while they do put out some decent stuff, and this is proof of it. So I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.